there any frameworks or obvious deficiencies and weaknesses that our panel can point out today? I'm happy that some of the panelists over here not only have an understanding about the US FDA, but also have a wider and a broader experience relating to other international markets. And therefore, all of us tend to benefit from, from such an understanding and experience. Let me briefly introduce our panelists today. Mr. Brian Nadel is the sole proprietor of a consulting firm that he set up in 2011. He has over 25 years of diverse experience in pharmaceutical quality assurance, quality systems, remediation, inspections, active pharmaceutical ingredients. He was a senior director who was responsible for supplier quality in the US Corporate Quality and Compliance Department for a very large pharmaceutical manufacturer. He assists companies in maintaining and developing quality manufacturing operations. To make his job interesting, he speaks 5 languages. He shared with me just before we came into the room. He holds a bachelor's degree in biology and is a certified regulatory affairs professional. He's a member of the Parenteral Drug Association Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. Our next panelist, Mr. Warford Rini. He's an expert on compliance, mainly for sterile manufacturing, injectable, biologics and oncology. He also has 25 years of experience in building, developing and managing teams to solve complex technical, regulatory, compliance and business challenges. He has been assisting Indian API and pharma manufacturers from 2008 onwards. His frequent interaction with the US FDA enables him to assist manufacturers to meet the most current regulatory expectations. And we think that his key strength in the area of regulatory inspection expectation for API, OSD, and biologics should be useful for our session this morning. Dr. K. Bangaru Rajan, he joined the Drugs Control Department in the year 1986 as a drugs inspector, and he was adjudged the best drug inspector in 2005. He joined the Central Drug Standard Control Organization in New Delhi in 2010, and from 2014 onwards he has been posted at the CDSCO West Zone Mumbai office with an overall in charge of the Western region, responsible for uniform implementation of the provisions of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Mr. Kalpesh Vaghela, he is an expert on computer systems validation. He has been helping Indian international pharma companies to achieve compliance. He trains and motivates staff for a right first time approach. He has 17 years of work experience with India's major pharma company, out of which 7 years were dedicated in software validation, risk assessment jobs which were carried out in USA, Europe, China, Middle East and Africa. Mr. Kaushik Desai is a pharmacy graduate from Manipal and a postgraduate in pharmaceutical technology and a diploma in industrial management from Mumbai University. He has over 30 years of multifunctional experience in reputed pharmaceutical multinational companies like Hext, White, Johnson & Johnson, Global Pharmatech, and with herbal company Charak. In his career span of 3 decades, he has been actively involved in management of both green and brownfield projects. Mr. Desai has faced successfully many international audits during his career, and he has widely traveled to UK and Europe to showcase techno-commercial capabilities. Mr. Sudesh Shetty, a partner in the risk consulting department of KPMG in India, has agreed to be the moderator this morning. He is a BE computer science and he has worked extensively in the life science and retail consumer product sector for the last 6 years. He's been a regular speaker in conferences and conducts forensic workshops for clients to demonstrate capabilities and identify opportunities for addressing pain areas within an organization. Prior to joining KPMG, he was with Ernst & Young, KPMG and Deloitte. He has lived and worked in the US for almost 3 years on deputation to General Electric and has been on multiple client engagements in the UK with cross-continent exposure. He has been engaged with a multinational pharmaceutical giant with presence in India for their API and formulation plants. He has also helped a leading topical contract manufacturer in proactively assessing data integrity issues prior to their anticipated US FDA inspection. Thank you all of you once again. Let me hand it over to Sudesh to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prathan, for introducing us all. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this discussion on the complex FDA regulation. Since we've started a bit late, what I would do, I would just start off with my first question, and my first question is going to come to the actual challenges that the Indian pharmaceutical industry is facing, primarily that we see and hear from the US FDA perspective. So my question is coming to you, Brian. What do you see as change in the Indian pharmaceutical industry from an FDA compliance perspective for the last 5 years?
Thank you, that's a very good question. One of the biggest problems that the Indian pharmaceutical industry is suffering from is our data integrity issues. And not all Indian companies are bad, but it's those few bad Indian companies who have found, FDA has found data integrity problems that have brought the entire Indian pharmaceutical industry, given them a bad name. Because that's what you hear about. You don't hear about the good companies. You only hear about the companies that are in trouble. And the problem is that it has to come from senior management. Senior management has to dictate that we're going to follow continuous quality improvement, or we're going to practice first time right, or we're going to follow quality risk management processes so that we can be prepared for audits at any time. And it's a problem when top management has, I call it just put the product on the truck, when they have that kind of mentality. And the mentality is quality needs to be in charge. And nobody considers the cost of quality. They think that as a negative thing. But cost of quality is very important, because you may have to invest several $100,000 to improve the quality of your operations. But by making such an investment, you will prevent recalls, you will prevent warning letters, and you will prevent being put on the import detention list. And nobody wants to be put on the import detention list.
That's a good point that you bring forward, Brian. Now, when we talk about the whole cycle of inspection, it would be nice for the audience to hear from you as to what is the typical cycle. The EIR coming in, the 483, the warning letter, or the import alert, and then followed by what is the cycle that is followed, and what is it that the actual investor community should be looking at and be worried upon?
Hey, I do have that all in my written presentation that I'm going to prepare, but just to give you a quick summary, is I started my career as a field investigator for FDA in FDA's New York district. And the district offices think that for FDA think if they inspect a company and they write a few observations, then they should be issued a warning letter. Well, after I worked in the FDA district office for about 8 years, I got promoted to the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research in Rockville, Maryland, or the drug headquarters for FDA, and I worked as a compliance officer there in the Office of Compliance, the Division of Manufacturing and Product Quality, which is the GMP division. And they take a more holistic view on issuing warning letters and taking regulatory actions against companies. The district offices, they want to issue as many warning letters as possible because they feel that justifies their existence. And then there's a competition between which warning letter ends up, which district office ends up issuing the most warning letters. But I learned when I worked as a compliance officer at Cedar that 90% of my responsibility was reviewing recommendations for warning letters, seizures, injunctions, and consent decrees. And so instead of writing the establishment inspection reports, what I did at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research was read other people's establishment inspection reports that came along with recommendations for regulatory actions. And I used to get letters that, maybe like a 4 or 5 page letter, including with the establishment inspection report. And in those letters, they'd say the firm adequately responded to the observations. So I called the investigator. I said, so why are you sending me a recommendation for a warning letter? And why didn't you include the firm's responses to the observations? And they're like, oh, okay, I'll send them to you. And so I would end up having to take like a 4 or 5 page recommendation and write a 15 or 20 page letter why I don't approve the warning letter. And that's the difference between the district offices and the headquarters. Headquarters takes a holistic approach. They look at, one, the nature of the products. Are they sterile injectables or are they non-sterile topicals? Then 2, they look at the history of the company as far as their compliance history. 3, they look to see if these are repeat observations or are these new observations. Or they also look, are these observations one-time incidents or are they patterns? And then more often than not, I don't have any kind of statistic, but if I was about to come up with a number, I would say I probably did not approve approximately 70% or 75% of the recommendations for regulatory actions that I received from the district offices.
Thank you, Brian. That's really helpful. Mr. Wofford, I would want to understand from you now. You've seen the India market. You've worked with a lot of Indian pharmaceutical companies as well. What do you see as the change that is being driven thanks to US FDA observations coming out and coming out quite bluntly in terms of the processes, the technology, and the people that drive these two, right?
Those are great questions. I want to make a confession before I begin that I'm a mole. I'm in India. I've been in India since I was a teenager. And my home is in San Francisco, but I come back and forth all the time. And over 20 years ago, I married an Indian woman. So I have been an Indian husband for decades. So that's my confession. So I have a deeper understanding of what it is to be in an Indian family with, I have about a dozen uncles and aunts and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and their parents and all that. So so that's my confession. I'm a mole within India. So, but to answer your question, it's a very complicated thing. So before the FDA started opening offices in India, the inspection process took about 3 months to get the visas in line, country to country discussions, invitations, back and forth. It was a very formal process. And it took about 3 months. So in Hyderabad, and I know specifically in Hyderabad because I've talked to the heads of quality in Hyderabad, there used to be a cottage industry that was killed by the FDA having offices in Mumbai and Delhi, where they would rewrite the batch records. They would take the batch records from manufacturing, they give it to the cottage industry to rewrite by hand all the batch records to be perfect. So when the FDA came in, okay, here's our batch records. And there were no mistakes. Everything was perfect. There was nothing to see. You can't have an observation if you don't see something. So once the FDA came and started opening up offices in India, well, no, there's no time now to rewrite the batch records. You have the inspector come. I'll be there next week. I'll be there, knock on the door. Last April, a year ago April, we had the first one where they knocked on the door. Hello, we're the FDA, we want to see your stuff. So that just-in-time inspection, it's really critical because it requires you to be always ready.
Sure.
And so it also has changed the mindset, where before you were focused on getting ready for an inspection, now you see companies start to change and say, I just need to have good quality, right? I need to always be ready, which really just means I need to have good quality systems, good quality all the time. Then I don't really worry so much about them knocking on my door, because they're going to knock on my door, right? And now the Indian FDA also is starting to do so. Starting to have joint inspectors, also they're knocking on the door. And I was very heartened to see in the last year great things coming out of the DCGI, wonderful stuff. So very happy about that. So that kind of answers that one thing. To sort of follow up on Brian's initial comment about the data integrity, I have a lot of my slides in my session are about that. And it's about the culture of India and why it's so difficult in India. It's difficult everywhere, no doubt. Part of the problem is that the FDA regulations are made by Americans, obviously. And Americans have a very different view on the world. We grew up in a bubble, kind of. From 1776, we grew up separate from the rest of the world. And the rule of law in the US sort of grew up differently as well. So that rule of law is really strong. And over breakfast we were talking about this. The head of quality in a US company is very different than the head of quality in an Indian company. Head of quality in a US company, when the FDA comes in and they say, seizure, you've damaged the public, you've put products in the market that are damaging the public, they're harming the public, someone maybe died, it's certainly the owner of the company will get in trouble, for sure. But also the head of quality will get in trouble. The head of quality is the one who signed his or her name on that piece of paper that said that product's good for the market. Those people are personally responsible for that market. They're personally responsible, and they will be fined, they will go to jail. You go to jail.
And get debarred.
And get debarred. You can't work in the industry ever again. This is a huge thing in the US. So if I'm the head of quality, which I've been interim head of quality for 2 companies now, if I'm the head of quality and I sign my name, it's my name going to jail, okay? It's on me. And if I'm the head of quality in any company in the world, what's my salary compared to the owner of the company? Now the owner of the company should go to jail. He's the one who made the product. But the head of quality, 1/10 to 1/100th the value of their salary. So in US, the heads of quality are extremely militant about quality because it's their name. It's their ass that goes to jail, right?
So I'm going to have a follow-up question to that there. We've heard a lot of it as an India problem. Is it similar in the US or the other regulated markets?
It's different, but how to say so? So in the 1980s, before the GMPs became strong, it was very prevalent in the US. And I think everyone will understand this. Companies are set up by scientists. Pharmaceutical companies are set up by scientists. Now, when a scientist goes to school, is that a liberal arts education? No, it's a scientific education. It's about numbers, it's about chemistry, it's about physical things. The social things, not so much, right? So when a head of company starts a company, they're generally a chemist, and their focus is on chemistry. They're not thinking about public safety. They're thinking about the chemistry in their products. And their mind, because they went to a school and they went through, generally these are PhDs who start companies, and they went through school and they became extremely filtered by that education. So what they know is what they know. What they don't know is what they need to know. That's the problem. So when you start that company, if the owner is a chemist and they started that company, their value for quality, they see that as a soft thing, not as a hard thing. I understand chemistry, I understand numbers, I don't understand this documentation, I don't understand this other part, I don't understand that. So we'll focus on the quality. My product meets the specification, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that your people didn't do the proper training, they didn't do the proper analysis, they didn't do the proper manufacturing, they didn't do the proper thing, therefore the product is not good. But it passes the chemistry. Yeah, but you didn't do it in a way to protect the public.
Warden, can I interrupt here, please? There's a section of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It's section 501A2B. That section is always referenced on warning letters. And what that section says, if your products are not in compliance with current good manufacturing practice regulations, they are therefore adulterated, regardless of the fact that they may test and meet all specifications.
That's a very important point. I mean, the point that's being made is that you have a blockbuster product and you know this works. But if the documentation behind each and every batch that rolls out is not good enough, the product is not good enough. That's the message that the US FDA has been driving. Now, having talked about the US FDA, there's so many new initiatives that's been taken by the CDSCO. And Dr. Bangaraj, I would want to talk to you about that and try and understand as to what's changing. You're not in the limelight. If you do an inspection, it does not get reported, it does not get followed. The stocks in the market do not fall the way a US FDA inspection result comes out. What is it that's happening, sir, on ground? Wofford brought about a point about collaboration with the US FDA as also one of the initiatives that's going on.
So, good morning, everybody. So, the collaboration with the US FDA goes back a decade, you can say.
Okay.
The US FDA office has come as Brian and others are saying that when our companies in 80s, 90s wanted to get a US FDA approval, so they had to submit an application to the US FDA and they do visit the manufacturing premises of the companies, and the process starts.
Sure.
And once it is approved, then our manufacturers are exporting their products. So that is the thing. Now after establishment of our US FDA office, Indian chapter, you can say, so frequent inspections started taking place. So in 2000, because it was all going smooth, in 2013, 12-13, the big incident that data integrity of one of a major company has come to the limelight. Since it is the #1 company in India and it was published so much through the media, what had happened, the stocks of that particular company suddenly slumped. And in continuation of that, one or two more companies were inspected at the same time, and in those companies also some of the data integrity deviations were noticed by US FDA. So Government of India took a serious note of this. So they wanted to eliminate this from so that our drug manufacturer will understand the US FDA regulations as well as other international regulations. So what Government of India did is with US FDA, WHO, as well as Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, a group of major manufacturers in India, they conducted a series of workshops in different parts of India. That is 4 parts: Ahmedabad, Goa, Chandigarh and Hyderabad, wherein a group of clusters manufacturers are situated. So they invited US FDA regulators in that workshop, and WHO people were also there, and wherein manufacturers, that is production side as well as quality control side, participants were there. I think I was one of the person in Goa workshop. More than 150 delegates were there, most of them from the pharma companies of Goa and nearby area. So it helped our Indian pharmaceutical manufacturers to understand the definition of the adulterated of US FDA. In our Drugs and Cosmetics Act, adulteration is entirely a different meaning.
Sure.
But in USFDA adulterated, if any data is also not a proper one, then they call that product as an adulterated product. So this was the first series of workshops we were having in 2014. And subsequently, Government of India has also given, because in the meantime, in 2010, we have, actually there were only 117, we can say, human resource persons, that is inspectors and other in CDSCO. Whereas now today it is around 475 inspectors are there. In 2010, we have inducted about 45 drug control officers. So they have been given training, a rigorous training of 15 days, including the basics of drugs and cosmetics action rules. So subsequently, what we thought in 2012 there was an NRA assessment by WHO. So though we have cleared the NRA assessment as India is a compliant regulatory authority, but WHO has set up a target of institutional development plan. So wherein they suggested first of all the human resources to be increased. Second thing is our drug regulators should be given more training on other parts, that is clinical, that is GCP inspections are to be included. So what we did, and then WHO GMP inspections, that is advanced WHO GMP inspections, as well as in vaccines and sera, both basic as well as advanced workshops were conducted to our inspectors. So these all made our inspectors standard higher. So they are now doing the inspections and giving their expertise to the Indian drug manufacturers. So that is one thing. The other part is after 2010, one batch of people have come. In 2013, another 110 drug inspectors have been inducted in drug control department. And 2015 we have started further expansion of the department. On that, 147 new inspectors have been selected through Union Public Service Commission. Out of 147, almost 50 to 60 people have already joined in the headquarters at Delhi. And then remaining people's, that is medical and other certificate verifications are going on. I hope that within 3-4 months the others will also join. So these are the manpower is there. And then regular continuous trainings are going on. Now, I think 2 years back we have, that is Government of India has made an MOU with FDA USA, as well as we have almost all leading TGA, we have a MOU with EU, we have MOU, as well as Russian authorities, Chinese authorities. Government of India has a memorandum of understanding with the different regulators. So what does it mean? It is we are sharing, that is information, that is whenever any information is needed by our Indian regulators, we request the concerned authorities, foreign authorities, so they will be sharing their information.
Are the inspection reports also shared?
Inspections reports, actually, for along with US FDA and EU, our inspectors are going as an observers.
Okay.
So they are seeing how the inspection, that is manufacturing units are being inspected, and they observe. And normally, as a matter of fact, this USFDA is not sharing the inspection report with our inspectors. However, it seems they share the report with the headquarters, the Government of India.
Okay.
So that is happening, and it helps a lot to our industry as well as the regulators. So in the same way, that our authorities are also giving the necessary feedback to the concerned authorities. That's how it is happening.
So that's really good to hear. Now that this is a change that we've seen. Prior to USFDA getting really active in India, it used to be a USFDA inspection and the whole effort going towards a USFDA inspection. Now what's changed is the regulators are actually discussing the findings. There are joint inspections, there are joint actual investigations, so to say, that's going on, and they are collaborating in a much better way when it comes to the remediation part that the industry is trying to achieve. That's something that's seen quite proactively. Mr. Waghela, we've seen the shift from the cottage industry to automation that's been adopted by the pharmaceutical industry, and with automation comes the challenge of ensuring compliance to 21 CFR Part 11, that is the computer system validation, and that being an enforcement, the audit trails being enabled, the user access management controlled, and the following of STLC. What do you see is changing now? Do you see more compliance-driven initiatives from the Indian pharma industry right now?
Good morning. Technically speaking, now the systems are getting more and more complicated, and we have to focus on each and every part of the process so that we cannot be caught under the data integrity clause. So we have to be GXP compliant, as well as the data integrity is also a focus. Last year's average, 33% of the warning letters was carrying a data integrity clause. Correct? So we have to focus on the SDLC, that is a software development life cycle. So start from the beginning, concept phase. We have to ensure that we are selecting the right kind of a vendor who is competent. We have to map the process very correctly, because earlier the work was happening on the manual side by the SOPs. Now complete to a CFR 210 and 211 is slowly coming to the computers. So it has to be mapped properly. So mapping process flowchart has to be completely controlled. Afterwards, it is a validation. We have to challenge the systems thoroughly to ensure that if we are going with the flow and if we are going against the flow. So after doing the risk assessment, we have to challenge the system. So for a higher risk, negative as well as positive challenge, which is going to ensure that system is going to work fine. And then we utilize it in the productions. Over a period of time, we get some incidents, chain control, kappa. We need to close those things by going into root cause analysis or failure mode effect analysis. And all these things has to be documented. So only automized system will do that. And at the end, last thing is the retirement cycle. Whenever you are going to retire the systems, the data has to be focused, because data is independent of the system. So when we retire the system, we have to focus on the data migration, data retention, and data deletion. So we can have better control. And then once automation is good, we have to review by the exceptions. So say what you do and do what you say. Ethics is basically when nobody is watching what you are doing, that is very important. The quality has to be in the genes, and quality pays. It has to be brought down in all walk of pharma culture. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Waghela. Now, when we talk about technology and the adoption of technology, I'm an information security guy as well, and we always say people are the weakest link that comes to any kind of adoption that we see in the industry. Mr. Kaushik, I would want to bring this question to you from a skills and training and development perspective, as to how do you see the change being adopted, and where do you see that the Indian pharmaceutical industry needs more training from the actual shift of what we see as 483s, warning letters and import alerts to a culture of quality.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Suresh. And good morning to all of you. But before that, let me thank our Philips Capital for giving me opportunity to share my views along with my student analysts. We have been talking about USFDA. It's not only USFDA, it is MHRA, EU, all global regulatory agencies, including Indian regulatory agencies. But let's understand what is 483. 483 is just a set of observations. We don't get alarmed with set of observations. Alarm comes if you don't attend to those observations, if you don't address it properly. So there is enough time. We don't know that because press just reports 483. Tomorrow my Indian regulator also comes and give observation. It doesn't go to press, but it's at 483 for me to comply. Same MHR. If you see that over the years, I have seen that the time you get 483 and the time you get either warning letter or the import error is almost 10 months. That's an average time. It takes 10 months to address, and 5 years data we have seen. So company has enough time to address those challenges. But what happens in reality? See, we are all Indians. We have been brought up in a different culture, different set of mind, different way of working. For us, see, nodding is this also yes and this also is yes. You know, so when the inspector comes to round, you don't know what you answer. For you, you have done proper job, but the inspector doesn't understand. So this starts with the company culture. You have to train and train. Another, I tell you, work culture. See, we all are used to put a house in order when the guests are around. We don't put a house in order when 24/7. You know, we always keep things in proper housekeeping we do, even in a house. That same follows in the company. Till inspection is announced, we don't do anything. You know, so that's the area where we really need to address. Another simple thing I'll tell you, we all have been driving. How many times we have crossed the signal when policeman is not there at the junction? We do that. We don't comply. And that thing has to change. You know, that's what we are looking at. And that change starts from the yet younger generation. You have to catch them young. Those who are already 60s, 40s, and that, it takes little time for change. So what is the association? I was an industry too, I retired from industry, but I was now Secretary for Indian Pharmaceutical Association, where we mainly focus on training and development. We are member of a Life Science Skill Development Council that is formed by Ministry of Skill Development under Skill India program. And if you may not be aware, but Mr. Satish Reddy, who is head of Dr. Reddy's, is chairing that council. And see, they are working seriously. Every quarter we have a meeting. Now, there are 61 jobs have been identified and listed for each companies, pharma companies, to go through that and do the assessment. This council has sent letters recently to all the companies. DCG has taken initiative on that. Letter was sent to all pharma industries in August 2016, saying that we are there to support you. We'll do skill assessment for you, and then it's up to you to decide whether to use the council expertise or you use in-house expertise. They are not forcing you to take only to council expertise. But not many companies have still come forward. That's what we have been looking into. And although there have been a lot of incentives, government is putting incentives. I am not a spokesperson of government, but they have said that companies, those who are less than 150 crores turnover, there won't be any charge for skill assessment. And those who have more than 150 crores, charge is minimal per person, less than 1,000 rupees. And that's the opportunity what we have as a company. That's the government side. But association side, what we do? We see that a lot of 483s are coming, warning letters are coming. It's the first line supervisor is always in tension whenever there is an inspection. Managers are always going to be in tension because they have different skill to represent, but the first line supervisor. Now US FDA inspectors, they come, or any inspectors they come, they don't talk to only the senior managers. They go to shop floor, they go to the operator, they go to the production supervisor and talk to them and try to understand how you have trained them. All observations, I have seen this, always one observation on training and second is the documentation. Training documents are perfect at many places because a lot of consultants are around, a lot of people are around, internet is around, you know what to write. So people write very nicely, they do the training program, there's a classroom training, but effectivity you see when you go on shop floor. Something is written is different, but what you see is different. Right, Mr. Waghela said, I won't say do what you say, write what you do and do what you write. I'll put it that way. Okay. So, we as an association, we have training institutes done by our Tamil Nadu state, Bangalore, where they train final year pharmacists, first line supervisors, and the companies send their supervisors, entry-level supervisors, or those who have 0 to 3 years experience for training. And they go for classroom intensive training for at least 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on the module what they select. At the same time, we sensitize the people, sensitize the government, sensitize even industry by taking up issues and explaining them what it means. Like recently now, quality matrix is another area which is coming up, it's in draft guideline. But very less things are understood. Like quality by design. Everybody knows quality by design. You will see in paper QBD not followed. But no one knows what is QBD. If you read, it's nice. But how to implement it, no one knows. So that's the area we come in the play. Another area what we have seen, if you say MHR has recently come out with statistics on 2015 most cited quality deficiencies. In that, 33% of the quality deficiencies were in 2015 on pharmaceutical quality management. Remaining were on facilities, documentation in that order. So what we do for quality management? I am also part of Indian Drug Manufacturers Association. We have started a course with NSF UK, and that's going on pharmaceutical quality management. It's a year-round course with the different modules. Every alternate month, people undergo. Companies are going to send a set of 40 will be trained initially in the first year, starting from this September. So initiations have been done, but what we see, the progress is not to the extent what we perceive, because it's a different kind of audience. Normally we talk technical and the technical jargons, but you may not understand those things. But I'll say from investors' point of view, you want to make results. You don't want any negatives for any company. And that may not happen. If you see, we are the largest US FDA certified sites other than US. It's plus 500. And how many validators came in 2015? 16. 1-6. Of course, it went up in 16th, almost became 25 plus. But nothing to get alarmed on that. If you see warning letters, it's on all data integrity, more issues, but not on the quality of the product per se. No products have been recalled and now what Indian companies are doing, say, okay, for example, X company gets a warning letter for you get warning letter for the site, not for the company. You cannot import from that site. But now, a lot of companies, I'll say all progressive companies, have same products registered from multiple sites. So the business doesn't get affected to that extent. Which may not be aware, press may not be aware that.
So Mr. Kaushik brings up a very valid point. I mean, an EIR is an establishment inspection report, and that too it's for a particular batch. That's an application slide for as an NDA or an ANDA, for which the establishment is being reviewed. The particular manufacturing line is actually getting reviewed, and compliance to that, as far as the documentation that was submitted, is what's looked upon.
The original data.
The original data.
Looked upon compared to the data that's submitted in the ANDA or the NDA.
True, very true. So that's the part that comes up. I mean, if it's an EIR that's issued to a company, well, it's a sense of joy that's seen in the actual stock market towards, well, they have received an EIR. Right? Is there a euphoria movement that we need to be looking at? I mean, Brian, my question would be first to you, and then I'll touch upon on the other side to it.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something to what my esteemed colleague said about the Indian people. One of the 6 languages that I speak is Japanese. And the Japanese people are the same way like the Indian people. They don't like to say no. So they say yes, but they're actually saying, yes, I understand the question.
Yes.
I've spent about 1.5 years in Japan, and I studied Japanese karate for a long time. And even though my teachers were all English, we were only allowed to speak Japanese in class. And then it was to just say, thank you, teacher. Anyway, I've even written an article on doing business in Japan, and this is included in my article, is that when you work in Japan, and I chose to go to Japan when I worked for FDA to do foreign inspections for 2 reasons. One, I spoke some Japanese, And the second was FDA will only pay for your business class accommodations if the trip is 14 hours or longer. So I knew, because I'm a big guy, I like to go business class, and I knew that Japan, and the last time I went to Japan for FDA is when I worked in Rockville, Maryland, and I had to go economy. They had a direct flight from Dulles Airport to Narita Airport, 13 and a half hours. I never went again. Anyway, what I wrote in my article and what's true is they won't say no. So the answer to the question whether it truly is yes or no is always going to be yes. But when they mean no, they say yes, but they're really saying, yes, I understand. Although their answer may be no. And so I've learned, since I did a lot of work with Japanese companies, I've learned to ask them a question and to phrase it this way. Isn't it true, or aren't I correct, that you did not do this? And then they have no choice but to say yes. Because if you ask them the answer, and it's just a straight yes or no answer, you're always going to get yes. And now, back to your other question. Can you please
So my second question was essentially...
Oh, when you receive the EAR.
Yeah.
That's a great question. FDA is transparent. If you look at the FDA websites, at the headquarters websites, there is so much information on those websites. As a matter of fact, most of my experience is in pharmaceuticals. And I took it upon myself to get that Regulatory Affairs Certified designation from RAPS, just because I thought that'll help me earn a higher salary when I leave FDA. FDA didn't pay for my studies. I did it on my own time. And I needed to focus on the devices, because I never knew about devices. And I used that CDRA, Center for Devices and Radiological Health website, so I could study about devices, so I could pass the test. That's besides the point. FDA is transparent. Once you have rectified all your problems, they will issue you a copy of the EIR, the Establishment Inspection Report. When companies receive a copy of the Establishment Inspection Report, they celebrate, because that means their status is changed from OAI, which means Official Action Indicated, and it puts all their products on hold until they've been, usually it involves a re-inspection, or sometimes it may suffice to simply respond adequately and for them to accept your response, and then they change the status from Official Action Indicated to Voluntary Action Indicated. So when you receive that EIR, you celebrate. I'm actually working for a company right now, and I can't discuss the particulars, but they received the EIR, but there's nothing to celebrate about. And I can't say anymore because of confidentiality. But normally, when you receive a copy of that EIR, it means FDA is no longer considering taking regulatory action against you, and everything is back to normal.
So Brian, you brought up a good point, and this is something that you would always watch out for. There are three terms in a 483 that will come out: NAI, VIA, and OIA. What are these three terms? Between you and Wofford, I mean, so Wofford, between you two, if you could help us understand this, because this is again a question that you would have as to, well, is this 483 good or bad? Can I look at investing in this company? Will it stand? Do I stand a risk of this 483 becoming a warning letter in future? Is there an impending import alert? Will it impact just the plant, or will it impact the company? I mean, these are the questions that comes out time and often looking at the 483. If you could help us in that.
Sure.
You're the expert from FDA.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everybody for coming today. I'm honored to be invited to speak here. Let's just say I've been in about 200 or 300 companies in my career with FDA and in the pharmaceutical industry, maybe even 400 companies. Anyway, when FDA does an inspection, if they find no observations, the inspection is classified NAI, which stands for no action indicated. That's the best you can get. But you really shouldn't celebrate. A lot of companies celebrate when they get no observations. And I'm trying to teach people that's wrong, because FDA is only there for a few days. They're usually focused on a specific product line, and that's because the company is mentioned in someone else's ANDA or NDA. They're only there for a few days. In English, we say they're only looking at a small piece of the pie, because they only have a short period of time to be there. So I try to teach people, and that's what I do for a living now, is to teach people, no, you do not celebrate when you get no observations and you get VAI. It just means you need to continue the hard work to focus on continuous quality improvements. Next level is VAI. VAI means you got some observations. The observations were not considered to be critical or major. You adequately responded to the observations. FDA accepted your written response, and it's okay. The worst classification is OAI, which means official action indicated. And usually when you get classified as OAI, it automatically puts everything on hold. Yes, you can continue to distribute products that are already approved. But if you submit any new ANDAs or NDAs, or if any of your customers who use your products submit an application that includes your name because you supply one of the products, none of those applications will be approved until you get a re-inspection by FDA, a passing re-inspection that's either NAI or VAI. Your classification is then changed from OAI, and then applications will get approved. So typically when you get OAI, it's usually a prelude to a warning letter.
That's really informative. I mean, that's something, I looked around and I see everyone's writing in on this entire explanation. Well, I want to bring two points to you, Brian. One is, we're $1 billion plus, and if you do this, it's a yes. Please learn it's a yes. It's difficult for us to change. We do this and it's a yes. But yes, that's essentially one of the reasons why the inspections turn out to go in a horrendous way, because the analyst who's trying to answer to the question struggles with the yes, and at times he has understood the question, but not understood that he's supposed to say a yes or a no to the question, and the nod takes us for a toss. The second one that you brought out was the time taken by US FDA to do the inspection. Most of these guys do due diligence. And when they do due diligence, they also have that short window of 4 to 5 days, a week on site, where they are doing the number crunching. They're also trying to understand the other challenges that the company has. And these snippets that you gave just now is helpful in determining, well, if the plant is at risk, is there an impending import alert? Because the duration, like Mr. Kaushik brought out, the duration to get a warning letter or to face an import alert is actually an approximate of 10 months. And in these
Or longer.
Or longer.
That's one of the reasons why I left FDA, because I found it to be extremely frustrating, because it's a government bureaucracy, just like the Indian government. I found it to be absurd for you to take more than a year to issue a warning letter, and then on the front page of that warning letter, it says your products are adulterated and could therefore be harmful to the patient. If that's the case, how could you take 1 year until you issue that letter? It's because you have to go through so many rounds of approvals, and it justifies everybody's existence in the Food and Drug Administration, that there are so many different levels of approval that have to go through in order for a warning letter to be issued. I'm very disappointed that there used to be the district office had direct reference authority, which means that they could issue a warning letter without getting approval from the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. For a while, they changed that, and it was my office at Cedar that had to review the warning letters and make a decision. They've now taken that power away from Cedar and given the direct reference authority back to the district offices. And I think that's bad, because the district offices all compete with each other, and they feel the more warning letters they issue, the better.
That's an interesting attitude that you bring into the whole conversation. So I would want to ask you now, and this question is essentially towards the India FDA, and what is happening from that perspective? Do we issue a 483 kind of a letter? Do we issue an import alert kind of a letter? When I say import, it's essentially India, so there's no import as a term that comes in. But are we also as stringent as the US FDA? And where do we look out for this information?
Actually, this Drugs and Cosmetics Act and rules, Schedule M, that is says that GMP for the manufacturing concern. So whenever our auditors are going to the manufacturing unit and they observe whether the existing company whether it complies with our Schedule M norms or not. If any non-compliances are noticed, then normally it happens that we have to understand there are state drug regulatory authorities are there, and then central drug standard control organization is there. So some of the units that exports to either regulated or non-regulated market in the world, it is jointly inspected by the CDSU inspector as well as the state drug inspectors. So whenever they come out with some non-compliances, like USFDA, they are telling that serious or critical. So we do also classify our observation as critical, major and minor. So these are classified, and normally we issue as per our rules, we have to give a chance to the manufacturers. So we call it as a show cause notice. So why action should not be taken against for non-complying with the following observations noticed during that particular inspections, joint inspections. So we usually give some time, that is normally within 15 to 21 days. So what, based on their reply, so the manufacturers after getting this show cause notice, they will say that they have taken the remedial steps. So these are, if it is a critical one, so immediate re-inspections will be there after receiving their CAPA. So if it is of minor, then we will be, if it is of SOP related or some other minor defects or minor non-compliances, based on the documents submitted by the manufacturers. So we will be issuing, that is either, here we have to understand the licensing authorities. Normally manufacturing units are being licensed by the state drug regulators, not by the central drug regulators. Only companies like blood banks and vaccines and sera units and medical devices manufacturing units, that is the notified medical devices manufacturing units, are being dual control, that is licensing authority of the state issue a license and DCGI approves it as a central license approving authority. So normally the state licensing authority, that is the state drug controller, is the power, as the power under the act to issue either a cancellation or suspension of a license or a warning letter, or in some of the cases the product, the particular product is being cancelled by the manufacturing, that is by the licensing authorities. This is how we do take the actions as per the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Why it is not brought into the public domain? Because it is a continuous process. That is CDSCO does have a website wherein we give the procedures for applications and different import registration division, biological division, and cosmetic division, medical devices division, and then FAQs are being displayed in our website known as cdsco.nic.in, wherein we don't publish the reports, that is reports of inspections, and same way some of the state drug control authorities do have their websites. There also they are not displaying the results of the inspections carried out by them. However, our websites do give the status of samples, because that is one of the major thing.
Sure.
So if any drug is being declared as of not of standard quality, so here I just wanted to give a procedure, that is our field officers, drug inspectors, both in central as well as state drug control authorities, regularly draw samples from the market, either from the manufacturer or from the hospital or from the chemists and druggists and wholesalers. These drug samples are analyzed either in the central drug testing laboratory. There are about 7 drug testing laboratories that analyzes samples done by the central drug inspectors, and there are 31 state drug testing laboratories situated in most of the states. The 29, only very few states doesn't have the analytical testing laboratory. So when the report comes as not of standard quality, those product, that particular product, that particular batch number is given in our website, that particular part is not of standard quality. So it gives the alert to the that is stakeholders, that is the consumers as well as the retailers and wholesalers, to stop the further distribution of that product. So in that way we are regulating. That is, for example, FDA Gujarat is even giving an SMS alert to the not of standard drug. Whenever a drug has been declared as not of standard quality for some other reason, either a failure in assay or failure in related substances or DT or dissolution, whatever it is, as per the pharmacopoeia standards, if it is declared that particular batch, they will say that please recall or stop further distribution of that drug. Not the other regular inspections are not being displayed. So this is how it is happening.
Sure. So now, if as a chief investing officer, and if I'm supposed to look at a particular company and try and understand from an India FTA perspective, is there a risk? Is there an impending action, or is there any kind of non-compliance that exists? What would be my channel to determine that? Would an RTI work for us?
Right. So you wanted to ask whether that particular company has been given any
Right, I mean that's the information that you want to look for.
That is, so RTI normally works in that case. But however, no, that we have now started another exercise. From last year, CDSCO as well as state drug regulators started doing the risk-based inspections. In last year, I think in September, October, we have the CDSCO has distributed almost 30-40 pages of self-appraisal report to all drug manufacturers, so that self-assessment, they have to do their self-assessment, and then they have to submit it to the both to the CDSCO as well as to the state drug regulators, and state drug regulators as well as CDSCO will review it, and if any company is found at risk, either based on the product or based on that processes they undertake, those companies are being jointly inspected for about 3 days by a group of people. One senior level officer, assistant drug controller, and one drug inspector, one assistant drug inspector, one person from quality control laboratory, the government quality control laboratory, do assess the or do audit that particular unit, and immediately the reports are being transmitted to the our headquarters. So headquarters will share that to the concerned state drug regulators, and this drug regulators, that is as explained previously, immediately instruct the or give a notice to the manufacturers to comply the non-compliances, and action is being taken. But since it is not in the public domain, so it is somewhat so we will be seeing, or the CDSU will start giving not the entire reports. They may be in a process. I don't know.
Okay.
It is a policy level.
Sure.
I have two comments that I'd like to add to the great comments that my esteemed colleagues have made. Is that one important thing about the United States pharmaceutical industry, I call it the bread and butter of the international pharmaceutical world because of the high costs of drug products in the United States. And to follow along with that is having worked, not only have I worked for the Food and Drug Administration, I spent more than 11 years in senior positions for two different large American pharmaceutical companies. And I've learned that there is a justification for the high costs of drugs. It's because it could take more than $1 billion of investment until you get approval of a new drug. And everybody thinks they hear about that 7-year law about patents. Problem is, the patent starts a long time before a product gets approved. The patent is on the indication of that molecule to treat a disease. So that patent is given, could be before a company even starts doing clinical studies. Clinical studies usually take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to complete. And so there's a justification for those high prices in the United States. And it's unfortunate, but in the United States, everybody thinks that the pharmaceutical companies are evil because they charge all these high prices. But you know, the United States is a capitalistic society. Why is it okay for all the other industries to charge higher prices for their products and to make a profit, but it's considered evil for the pharmaceutical companies to also make a profit? I don't think that's fair for the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, yes, they're doing good and they're helping people, they're prolonging their lives, they're saving lives, they're alleviating suffering, but they're not in it for charity. They're a for-profit business. And if they've invested $1 billion into getting a product approved, and then once that product is approved, they'll only have market exclusivity for maybe 2 or 3 years until there'll be generic products on the market. So they only have that short period of time, which could be as short as 2 or 3 years, where they have exclusivity, and that's where they try to make their money back. Then, once the first generic product gets improved, they have generic exclusivity. So if a price is, say, $600 for the innovator product, for the NDA product, that first person who gets the first NDA product sells it for $400 or $300. Then, after they lose their generic exclusivity, then they have many other people selling the generic, and then it's $20.
Thank you. Mr. Wofford, I have a next question for you, and this question is around the cost to remediation. Now this is again something that comes in play quite aggressively. We've seen a 483 come in, we've seen the company try and respond in the next 15 days, or a warning letter coming in and then respond in the next 15 days. But those 15 days is essentially an initial roadmap that's being defined out. Then starts the whole remediation process, right?
Right.
What is the cost to remediation and what is the duration to remediation?
It depends upon the problem. So if it's a data integrity problem, I think you have to assume that there is a problem within the company from top to bottom that allowed that to happen. Allowed it to happen because whoever's doing it, whether it's at the shop floor level, at the lab, whether it's at middle management, wherever it's happening, somewhere there's a culture in that company that allowed that to happen. To change that culture, it's a minimum of 2 years. And maybe you could change it in 2 days, but from an FDA's historic perspective, from what they've been doing over the years, it's a minimum 2 years before you're going to see an opportunity to change that warning. As soon as you get that warning letter for data integrity, you're kind of screwed, right? So how many in the room are married? Mostly men here. Are there any women? I haven't seen anybody.
I see a few.
Okay, in the back. You shouldn't sit in the back. You sit in the front. It's much better for us. So how many are married? Yeah. If your wife suspects you've been doing something bad with other women, how long will it take you to get out of the doghouse? Right? And you don't have to have done anything. It just has to be a suspicion, right? Same thing with FDA. As soon as you have become tainted with data integrity, you now have to prove you don't have it. It's damn hard to prove you don't have it. So now you have to go through remediation, enormous amount of training, and now the cost. If you have products that are not on the drug shortage list, it's about $20 to $30 million.
That's the cost of remediation.
Yeah.
At a bare minimum.
Bare minimum maybe 12 million.
Okay.
Yeah. But in that range, because you're going to hire consultants from outside like Parcel, you're going to hire Quantic, you're going to hire these extraordinarily expensive American consultants to come who won't know your culture, won't understand the culture, and they're going to basically come to say, I want to make money in India. And they're going to make pots of money. And they're going to make pots of money whether you get better or not. That's the issue. So the cost is huge. Now, if you have a drug on the drug shortage list, so you can say, I can still sell the product to that market.
You continue to produce for that
Right,
market.
you can. You will have to do that under third-party release.
Okay.
I was in charge of a third-party release team of 14 people at a plant here in India. And we charged for our services about $7 million a year.
That's the cost of remediation. And you're still doing your remediation while you are trying to ensure your product is out in the market through a third party which is going to go about reviewing every batch, every BMR to see that there is compliance vis-a-vis what's actually what the talk and what the actual body clone is when it comes to the plant, right?
And yes, one last thing. Our group didn't do any remediation. We were on top, right? Because our team was sequestered. They weren't allowed to speak to the people. They were only observing the manufacturing and the lab work. And they were reviewing batch records. They weren't allowed to speak to the other people unless my team asked a question. My role was to be the intermediary between that company and my team. So no, it was just additional cost.
Mr. Kash.
Just adding to what he said,
That's what was said. US has, FDA has a window. Your remediation process takes some time. You may give 15 days to respond, but the process takes time. You can always go back to US FDA, give them update and show them what you have done so far as an update. So that time itself you know whether you are on the right path or not the wrong path. You will need to do corrective action now on the same what you have been doing or what you have been doing is right. And that gives you confidence that okay, if you are on the right path, may not result in a warning letter or import alert at a later date. And most of the companies, they use this window to talk to them, go to them, and share with them their updates. You can add on that, Brian.
Yes, thank you. As a matter of fact, I have a recent experience with the 1 to 2 year answer that you just gave. There's a company in the United States, and what they do is they hire a group of, they don't hire, they just retain a group of consultants. And then all sorts of companies, financial companies, pharmaceutical companies, legal companies, go to this company, and then that company finds consultants and pays those consultants an hourly rate to talk on the telephone to these people. Well, I just did that last week. A very large company in the United States received a warning letter. And I tried to talk a little longer, but unfortunately, it became 59 minutes. But I still made okay. You know, I was not saying any nonsense. You know, I like to be detailed. I do my homework. And I told them that in order, this was very bad. It's public knowledge, I won't mention the name of the company, but it was particulates in sterile injectables. And it was also a pattern, and it was also found globally, not just at that site. And so I told them that I would say it will take at least 1 to 2 years until they remediate all of these problems. Because FDA asked them for specific data, environmental monitoring data, and to summarize, and I said, that in itself may take 6 months to gather and consolidate and write a report. And it was, I think, only about 7 observations, but they were all serious observations because they all involved sterile injectable products. And I gave the answer about between 1 and 2 years until they'll have to get a reinspection and they'll have to supply all this data that FDA specifically requested until they'll be changed from OAI to VAI.
Okay. I'll have my last question to Mr. Waghela out here and then open it to you for your questions. So Waghela, what I want to check with you is, we talk about computer system validation, we talk about equipments in the lab connected to a desktop and storing the results, right? When it comes to automation, well, these are the equipments which will now start storing data within and then function. What do you see as the next wave coming in?
Okay. Now, there are 2 kinds of instruments in the laboratories. Laboratories are under higher scrutiny nowadays because of data integrity, because that is the last stage for release of the batch. Once you release the batch, it goes out. And FDA and European authority is also focusing a lot on the laboratory in the audits. So basically you can have standalone systems or you can have a centralized systems wherein all data is going to a server. If it is a standalone system, you have to store it only at one location. You have to focus on the data backup, restoration, archival, retrieval, data retention, migration, and all those things. If it is a server, it is much easier because standalone system backup again is being taken by some kind of a method or maybe manually. If it is on the server, you can have it a standard routine, so every day it can be updated, daily backup, weekly backup, monthly, yearly, and you have the day backup till the data retention. So data has to be a focus, and you have to do the risk assessment for each stage of the data. So if you do that clearly, perfectly, even whole of the FDA comes to your plant, they will not find any problems. But for that, we have to get prepared, we have to work a little bit hard, and we have to be ready, proactively ready, ideally. Basically, there are 2 actions, proactive and reactive. Reactive action costs heavily. If you do the compliance at the very beginning stage when you are drafting the URS for the machine, plant, or a facility, it costs very little.
Future is going to be paperless factory. You know, there's a manufacturing execution system attached to your ERP systems, attached to your lab systems. You won't have any papers moving anywhere. There will be an audit trail for every action what you do.
True.
At the same time, that will be coupled with your continuous manufacturing.
Yes.
Now we have batch manufacturing. Future is going to be a continuous manufacturing, mainly for the high volume products. I won't say less volume products will take those things, but high volume products will go on. These 2 technological evolutions are going to change the entire audit trail, audit cycle, and the second findings, as well as the future of audits. And for that also I say, our generation has to get ready for that. We cannot keep on depending on outsiders to tell you what you should do. You should have within in-house expertise, IT as well as pharma, because there is a less interface between IT and pharma. IT talks all IT words, pharma understands only pharmaceuticals. And explanation to an inspector is done by a pharma quality assurance person, not an IT person. And that's the way the issue comes up, that how you validate what you need to do, the GAME 5 guidelines and all, ALCOA plus and everything. So that's the way, so there's a continuous training and that comes in.
I just read one thing. GAME 5 has segregated now 2 users. For any system, there are 2 users. One is a process owner who is focused on the process. And the second one is a system owner. System owner is an IT guy. There is no correlation between the 2 people. Process owner does the work and all data and other things are being managed by IT. Even user authentication, user rights and role-based responsibilities are also decided by the IT with the standard procedures. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are individual presentations as well towards this whole subject, which would add more insight to the topic that you have right now, that Brian has and Mr. Wagila has, and Mr. Wofford, you two have some slides to talk through.
Again, thank you all for coming today. I just have a brief presentation here. I do a lot of presentations, and I don't like all these crazy nonsense with PowerPoint about things flying in and flying out. I think that's just a waste of people's time. And I also don't make my slides too busy. Well, when I see some people put slides and they have arrows and diagrams and and then they spend 30 seconds on that slide. So I like to keep my slides very simple. And please, if anybody has any questions, you're certainly welcome to ask me today, or my email is on all the slides, and I'm sure you're going to get copies of the presentations. Please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to answer all your questions. Okay, so the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, abbreviated as FDA compliance. U.S. FDA has a foreign inspection cadre that conducts inspections all over the world. Now it's a little different that they have the offices in India. One thing we need to mention is, the focus here is on Indian pharmaceutical industry, but the Chinese pharmaceutical industry has very similar problems with data integrity. There's no difference between India and China. Data integrity problems are the same, whether they come from Indian companies or Chinese companies. Okay. These inspections can cover medical devices, biologics, foods, finished drug products, and active pharmaceutical ingredients. This presentation will be limited to FDA's coverage of finished drug products and APIs. That's because what my experience is limited to. FDA has permanent office in India. FDA opened the India office in New Delhi in 2008 to ensure that food and medical products exported from India to the United States are safe and are of good quality and are effective. FDA consists of many centers. The URL or the website for the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, abbreviated as CDER, is listed there. I'm not going to read it, it's on the slide. You'd be amazed at how much information are on those websites. Use them, learn about them, read them. Warning letters are on there. Everything, all the guidance documents are on there. ICH guidance documents, internal FDA compliance procedures. The IOM is the Investigators Operations Manual. That's like the Bible for new investigators. That's available on the CEDAR website. So use that CEDAR website. All the warning letters are on there. And so that CEDAR website is very important. It contains a stockpile of useful information. Since FDA is a government agency that is mandated to be transparent, you can find guidance documents and recent warning letters on it. FDA used to try to inspect regulatory firms every 2 years. Now they use a risk-based approach because of budget constraints. Also, FDA suffers from a large turnover of experienced investigators, chemists, and microbiologists. Many of these experienced employees leave the agency and either work for U.S. pharmaceutical companies or become consultants, like myself. I call it brain drain. FDA has increased the number of inspections conducted in India. This increase is because of the serious problems found with Indian pharmaceutical and API manufacturers. Moreover, FDA has increased the number of warning letters and the amount of firms that are placed on the import, and I learned last week when I was here, you call it export, detention list. Depends on where you're from. Every detention must be based upon evidence pointing to violations of the U.S. Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which is abbreviated as the FD&C Act. The current Good Manufacturing Practice Regulations, abbreviated as CGMP, are included in the FD&C Act. ICH-Q7 is the Good Manufacturing Practice Guidance for active pharmaceutical ingredients. ICH equal the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use. ICH is a product that brings together the regulatory authorities of Europe, Japan, and the United States. If API manufacturers import their products into Europe, Japan, and the United States, then they are required to follow the regulations in ICH Q7. And it used to be called Q7A. They just took the A off. It's still the same as it used to be. They just call it Q7 instead of Q7A. Okay, FDA's Form 483, Inspectional Observations. An FDA 483 is issued to a company when FDA finds serious deviations from CGMP. FDA employees are only supposed to list significant deviations from CGMP that they find during inspections. These FDA 483 observations are reviewed by CDER's Office of Compliance, and then I wrote BGN, that's my initials, former office. Not all observations listed on the FDA 483 are considered significant deviations. It is the compliance officers at CDER responsibility to review the FDA Establishment Inspection Report, abbreviated as EIR, the FDA 483 observations, and the inspected firm's response to the observations. The compliance officer reviews all of these documents and must concur with any recommendations for regulatory actions made by the FDA investigators. I mentioned before, if I had to pick a percentage when I worked as a compliance officer, I would say I would disapprove approximately 70 to 75% of the recommendations that I received. Okay, responses to 483 observations. 483 observations should be taken very seriously and should be addressed and responded to thoroughly. Question: if you receive FDA 483 observations, does this mean that you are also going to get a warning letter? Answer: not necessarily. Whether you receive a warning letter is determined by CDER's Office of Compliance. And that's for foreign inspections. Domestic inspections, I'm unhappy about it, but the district office have been given back the direct reference authority that was taken away from them for a while, and that's what it was when I worked at CDER as a compliance officer. Even the district office's recommendations for domestic warning letters and other actions had to go through my former office at CDER. Okay, FDA warning letters. Warning letters are only issued if the CDER compliance officer concurs with the recommendation to issue a warning letter. If you do receive a warning letter from FDA, it includes the following statements. After you receive this letter, you have 15 working days to respond to this office in writing. Specify what you have done since our inspection to correct your deviations and to prevent their recurrence. FDA's process of escalation that may result in the issuance of a warning letter. An FDA inspection leads to FDA 483 observations. Some firms do not receive FDA 483 observations. There are, believe it or not, some good firms out there, and I personally have a different philosophy than most people do about audits. If you do an audit and you're considered an experienced auditor, then why is that considered a problem that you had no observations? I consider that to be a good thing. You have an experienced person who did their best to find problems, found none, and deemed the company to be in compliance with GMP. But as an auditor, there's a lot of pressure put on you to find problems. And although, that's a lot of my experience and a lot of the jobs I've gotten is because I have auditing experience in the past, and it seems like I'll never get away from doing audits. But personally, I don't like doing them because nobody thinks like I do, that it's a positive thing, and you've certified that a company is in compliance if you didn't find any observations. They just say, oh no, you're not a good auditor, you didn't find any problems, therefore you didn't do a good job. Hey, if the 483 observations are significant and you do not respond accordingly, your company should expect to receive an FDA warning letter. If you do end up receiving a warning letter, then you unequivocally must respond and correct the deviations. The serious implications of data integrity. I put this in all caps because it's very important. Data integrity needs to be taken seriously in the pharmaceutical industry today and always. And I put that exclamation point there at the end because that helps to make a sentence even stronger. My best language is English. Risks of receiving an FDA warning letter for data integrity. If you receive a warning letter or your firm is placed on the import alert list, you may have to stop manufacturing, recall your products, train all your employees, validate your manufacturing processes, validate your testing methods, and requalify your equipment. You will also be required to hire consultants. Those consultants can cost you millions of dollars, and sometimes you need to hire several different consulting companies, not just one. This will cost you millions of dollars and can take several years to restart your production. You will not obtain any new NDA or ANDA approvals, and you will not be able to submit any changes to your already approved applications. Your stock price will go down. You may lose your customers, and you may have to close your facilities. Remediation after receiving an FDA warning letter. First thing you need to do is determine a plan of action. Then you need to provide a structured and detailed response that includes documentation for items already corrected and realistic timelines for completion of promised corrections. Try to determine the root cause, and then I put S after there. That I have experience in risk management. That was one of my responsibilities when I was senior director. I created the risk management department. I wrote the SOPs. I trained the people on it. Everybody's very happy if they find a root cause, but sometimes problems can and will have multiple root causes, and you need to consider that. Just because you find a root cause, everybody's very happy when they do that, but you also need to consider there can be multiple root causes. Then you need to find the root cause or causes of the deviations and implement sufficient corrective and preventative actions or CAPA plans. Include these CAPAs or the dates of expected completion in your written response to FDA. Send follow-up responses to FDA at predetermined intervals. Do not overwhelm FDA with thousands of pages of corrections. They won't read them. Remediation after receiving an FDA warning letter. If your responses to an FDA warning letter are determined to be inadequate by FDA's CDER Office of Compliance, you may be placed on FDA's import/export alert list. Current data integrity issues in the Indian pharmaceutical industry. Not all Indian pharma have problems with data integrity. There are many companies that do not have problems with data integrity. There are many great Indian pharmaceutical manufacturers. Regrettably, the companies that have received warning letters and have been placed on FDA's export alert list are giving the entire Indian pharmaceutical industry a bad name. FDA import alerts. Import alerts inform FDA field staff and the public that the agency has enough evidence to allow for detention without physical examination, that's abbreviated DWPE, of products that appear to be in violation of FDA laws and regulations. These violations could be related to the product, manufacturer, shipper, and/or other information. DWPA allows FDA to detain product without physically examining it at the time of entry. Preventative measures to avoid FDA 483 observations, warning letters, and import alerts. Following the practices of continuous quality improvement and quality risk management. Senior management must support the above initiatives. Even if you have an FDA inspection and you do not receive any 483 observations, do not become complacent. FDA inspections only last a short period of time and only look at a small piece of the pie. Pharmaceutical manufacturers can be consistently compliant with CGMP regulations if senior management supports and is willing to invest the time and the money necessary to be prepared for regulatory inspections at all times. Namaste. I guess I should have said that in the beginning. Thank you.
So, I don't even know how to use this thing yet. Okay, so I will riff through this. I'll go really fast, and I'll try to hit the high points. And because this is all about investment, I'll try to focus on those questions that you would use for due diligence, yeah? So I have a very nice long slide presentation, which will get some of it. So why companies struggle with compliance? Here is the definition. Do everyone get the slides at the end? Will they get the slides? Do people get these slides? They get a copy? Okay, good. So when you get this copy, this is why the US has changed pharmaceutical compliance around the world. We talked about it, and this is the actual citation from the regulations. That to be adulterated means that you don't conform to good manufacturing practices. This is a philosophical approach. What it's actually saying, which is very complicated, is that we're going to subjectively evaluate your objective data. And we are going to decide whether or not you have met our requirements. It's completely subjective. It's very difficult. Unless you're already in tune with how to approach this subjective approach, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to comply. But I'll go fast. If some of the data is false, by the way, I do use a few animations. I apologize to Brian. Sorry. If some data is false, data cannot be trusted. Equals all data is false. Means it's adulterated. Means import alert or warning letter. In India, compliance is an extremely complicated topic. And you can read through these slides, but I'll tell you from personal experience. It's complicated because the way you grow up in India is very different than the way you grow up in the United States. In most homes, and I've now experienced this by living in India, you have multiple generations living in your house. It can be a big house, it can be a single room, but you have multiple generations living with you. So what that means is you have a continuity of culture within your own family. And unless you live in a single house, so in the US, we have single families. They actually call single family dwellings. We live in a house that has no other family in it but our own, meaning the parents and the children, that's it. In India, it's very different. You have grandparents, you have grandchildren, you have great-grandchildren sometimes, you have people from both sides of your parents' family. It's a much more robust, more rich cultural environment within the family. And it also means you have continuity between generations for expectations of how you behave in society. We don't have this in the US. We have to learn it separately. You guys have it ingrained in your life every day, and it's a beautiful thing. I really enjoy having a giant family. My family in the US is 5 people. My family in India is about 60. On Saturday, we had 17 people over for a small gathering. Now what this does is you are programmed from a childhood on how you should behave in society and the relationship of your family to the society. You go to school, now it's changing in today's schools are changing, but up until at least 10 years ago, corporal punishment was a huge part of schooling. And that corporal punishment was focused around the compliance of the student to the teacher. That whatever the teacher taught you, you should learn. There was no room for asking questions that challenged the teacher's authority. So you are programmed by your teacher to behave properly and to comply with what's going on with the classroom. That actually is an extension of your family who also taught you to comply with the social norms. It makes for a very stable society. How do you have 1.some billion people not freaking out all the time? Because everybody knows how to behave with everyone else. Regardless of your religion, regardless of your whatever, it doesn't matter where you're from, your language, anything, you know how to behave with each other because you're just reasonable people, which you learned in your family, which is reinforced in school. Now, I will try to jump around. The one thing is that the US regulators have zero tolerance. MHRA has zero tolerance for data integrity. In this society, it's a little different. So if I say to you that how you behave is related to the people that you're working with. So if I have a boss, I have a relationship with that boss. In the US, my boss's relationship with me is one is I have technical knowledge, you're my boss because I have to have a boss, but if I don't like what you're saying, I'm going to challenge you. And actually, I'm expected to challenge you. In my schooling system in the US, 30% of my grade from 8th grade onwards, all through college, 30%, 50% in college, was on my participation in challenging the teachers. I am expected to. I will not pass my grades if I do not challenge the teacher. So our approach is very different. That approach has a different relationship when I have a boss. My boss knows I'm going to challenge him. He has to challenge me in a different way. Intellectually, we're challenged, but politically, we're rarely challenged. Politics, there are politics in giant companies, but in smaller companies, there's very little politics because we don't tolerate politics between each other in the US. And our regulations reflect that. So when an American comes here, let me see if I can jump around a little more. The key to this is that when you guys work with other people, the reaction you have to something that's going on in the plant will be very different than an American would have. And so if I tell you that sometimes the non-compliance happens because there's a regulation that is in conflict with your relationship with other people. So if I join a company in India and I've gone through this programming by childhood, programming in school, I already know what my relationship is with my boss. I know that when I join a hierarchical Indian company, I have a boss, he has a boss, he has a boss, all the way to the top. Every boss has to take care of the other boss, coming from bottom to top. So that relationship is there before I ever join the company. I'm already programmed to have that relationship. So when a compliance issue comes up that's in conflict with that, which will be the stronger thing? My relationship to the people or my relationship to that compliance issue? My feeling is that that relationship, society relationship, will be much stronger because it's one you know every day. So, and I will now jump to, key to this is that last one. These interactions are not inherently malicious. If something goes on the shop floor that's not compliant, it's not necessarily something that's bad. It may have a bad outcome, but it may not have been done for bad things. So these things that do happen can be really non-compliant. All right. Okay, so I want to get to these case studies. I told you I was in charge of a team of people releasing product to the marketplace. We came upon a problem, pure data integrity problem at the shop floor. Turned out that We looked at the records, at the logbook for the site entry at the gate, and there was a fellow, I'll call him Kumar. Kumar was not in the plant the day he said he was in the plant. His name was on the batch record, but he wasn't in the plant. It was clear there was a falsification. When we dug into this falsification, what we found, there were 4 people involved. There was a manager, there was a supervisor, and there were 2 operators. One of the operators was not in the plant. Kumar was not at the plant. His buddy had signed for him that day. His supervisor had signed that the batch record was done improperly, that we had the initial signature, he also signed for the second signature, and then the whole sheet was approved by the supervisor, which was then approved by the manager. When we found that these 2 records didn't match, we started investigating, we started interrogating these people. And it took 4 days for all of the truth to come out. In the end, and because I don't have much time, I'll tell you that Kumar didn't come because his wife was having a baby, and he wanted to be with his wife on the day she had her baby. The reason he didn't come, the reason of the data integrity problem was because he anticipated that his manager would not allow the supervisor to give him the day off. He never asked. He just took off. He never even bothered to ask. Why didn't he ask? Because he assumed he wouldn't get it. So from a cultural point of view, the company's in big trouble already. They're still, they have not gotten their EIR yet. It's now 40 years into it. The management of the company, that was the first time they really realized they had a problem in the middle management. That there was enough intimidation in the middle management that the fellow at the shop floor didn't feel he would get permission to go to be with his wife when she had her baby. So I want to talk about this because it was purely cultural. There was no malicious intent. Nobody said, you've got to do this. Nobody said anything. He just assumed, because of this programming in his mind, that this would be the way that it is. So far, tens of millions of euros spent. Warning letters still ongoing. Second one, US MNC with operations in India, problems with data integrity, proven falsification. We have found, so how many people are familiar with injectables? Injectables, yeah? Okay, good enough. So part of the injectable thing is you have to do what they call a media fill study. You have to run media in vials and prove that they can be sterile. What was found was a bag full of vials that had been contaminated, microbial contamination, in the trash yard during one of the media fills. The record said the media fill passed, but when the inspector went out, he found a bag, not the inspector, but the auditor went out and found a bag full of vials that had been contaminated. So obviously the media fill hadn't passed. So it was proven falsification on site. This was internally done. This was a US MNC guy from quality had come and he found this bag. So it's still all internal to the company. I was brought in to get them ready for their inspection. I went through the batch records, media fill batch records first, and said, hey, we've got this problem here. So that was how it was found. The old school management, who's a guy in his 70s, owns the company. And I met with him and he said, I don't have any problems in my plant. I said, well, you actually have a tremendous lot of problems in your plant, and one of them is data integrity. He says that's not possible because my people tell me I don't have these problems. I said, well, how often do you go to the shop floor? Because I don't need to go to the shop floor because my managers go to the shop floor. I said, okay, well, if you don't go to the shop floor, how do you know? Because my managers tell me. I said, well, your managers are telling you the wrong thing. You have these problems, and I showed him record after record after record. I showed him the deviations. This is what's going on in your plant. He blew up, he got really excited, he ran around and started talking to people. He found this problem. Now, the FDA was due any day. The FDA actually came 3 weeks later. We had written a white paper to explain what had happened and the process that we were going to do to remediate this problem that we were going to give to the FDA when they walked through the door. So I met with the guy the day before the FDA arrived. We had a plan in place. There were 3 big issues on the site, 3 white papers ready to hand to them. He said, hand those 2, but don't hand this one. This one about the vials, I don't want them to know about that. I said, look, they're going to find it. When the auditors come, the inspectors come in, they're going to find this. It's in the deviation record, it's in this logbook. They will absolutely find. They're also going to ask for this media fill batch record, and they're going to know there's a problem. I said, no, let them find it. I said, this is a really bad idea. FDA, just be transparent. Let them know you know. That will show that you have good faith and you're trying to solve the problem. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So, okay. So the inspectors came, first day, went through the inspection. Second day, halfway through the day, they found the issue. They stopped the audit. They walked off. FDA left the site. Said, we're done. We're completely done. We don't care anymore. They went away. They came back the next day. That company didn't have any product in the marketplace. So they obviously had called back to the home office, back to Washington. What should we do? What should we do? They came back and they said, okay, because you don't have product in the market, we're going to continue the inspection, but we're extraordinarily unhappy. Now, everything that you show us, we're going to have a doubt. So that was an old school management reaction to that, FDA inspection reaction. The net result, they're still answering questions after 1 year because the FDA now doesn't trust them. Yeah. Third case study. New generation plant head. This is in Vizag. There's a company there, a guy, 15 years of industry experience. He went from the shop floor, he worked as an operator, he became a plant head. Really nice guy, really intelligent guy. Highly respected for speaking truth to power. He's a younger guy, I suppose he's about 40 years old, 42 maybe. And he's not shy. Happy to talk to the CEOs, CFO, managing director. This is the problem, you need to take care of it. He did that. He's done that all his whole career. And he's had several jobs because some owners don't like that. He got a new job, upcoming FDA inspection. What did he do? He put the quality systems in place. He put the training in place. He had practice inspections, mock inspections. The net result, he had minor 483s with the inspector leaving a couple of days early. He said, there's not enough for me to find here, I'm going to go home. So he went home early. Why was he successful? So I actually interviewed him deeply because he was so successful on this. And so I said, so what did you do? And he said, I put all these things in place, I trained the people, I did all this stuff, I made sure that they were ready for the inspection. I said, okay. So was it because you did all that stuff? Was it because they had all that information that you passed the inspection? Or was it because you drove them to pass that inspection? Meaning, was it because he had the systems in place? Because we talk about systems all the time. Was it the systems that had a good inspection? Or was it because you had driven them to have that good inspection? And he really thought about it. It took him 2-3 minutes to think about it. And he said, no, I think it was me, because I drove them to do this. Right? I drove them to do this. I overwhelmed their hierarchical need to follow direction in the way they were and made them do this because it was me as the leader pushing them. So, okay, that's good information. When analyzing Indian manufacturing sites that do successfully pass US FDA inspection, they're mostly found to have strong executive leaders that were strongly focused on preparing the site for the inspection. The systems have to be in place. People have to know what they're doing, but without that leader, at least in India, without that leader pushing to say this is most important, it doesn't get done. These successes reinforce the idea of a corporate hierarchy being the dominant factor in compliance and the subsequent inspection success or failure. So my hypothesis is that the Indian corporate culture, which isn't just pharma, it's across all companies, it's a set way. You know the roles when you walk into that company, what role you play. As the fresher, as the managing director, everybody has a role to play within that company. And those roles and that social interaction overwhelm any chance for compliance when it comes in conflict. Sorry about the floating points. Requirements for leadership and quality culture. US, EU have recognized the need for strong organizational leadership. So it has now become a regulation that you have this. It wasn't a regulation before. It was an assumption. Now it's a regulation. Executive and quality must engage to discuss issues through quality management review. It's a requirement. Everybody must talk to each other about problems. Requirement to evaluate and manage risk, ICHQ 9. Risk management must happen, has to. Not a choice, it must happen. Multiple international data integrity guidances have come out in the last few years because it is such a big issue. And I think partly because in the West, there was an assumption that you shouldn't do it. In India, it's not about the assumption that you shouldn't do it, it's that the setup is so different and the social structure is different that it's causing these problems. I don't think there's anyone out there who's maliciously saying we have to falsify data. There may be a few rotten eggs, but I think by and large it's a social issue, not anybody doing something on purpose. An expectation to develop a quality culture. What does that mean? Honestly, what does that mean? Can you find a list that says what a quality culture is? Is there a checklist? Is there an objective scenario you can say, if I do these things, I will have a quality culture? No, it's a subjective evaluation of objective data to say whether or not you do. The role of the quality unit within operations. Does the quality unit have strength to say no? We've talked a lot about yes, but can the QA group say no? No, that product's no good. No, that process is no good. No, that material's no good. We can't do it this way. Accountability in the head of quality. Does the head of quality have the power to go to the managing director and say, we have a bad batch, we have to recall today. We have to pull it out of the market today, or does it have to be by committee and take 6-8 weeks to do it? Accountability of the ownership to the people in the destination market. Do the owners of the company realize that they are impacting the lives of people somewhere else? And do they care? The owner that I worked with in my second case study, he didn't care. It was pretty clear. The language of quality is a multi-vertical environment. What I mean by that was when I earlier talked about the scientists who went through that filtration to become a scientist, each of the departments within a pharmaceutical company, these people go through a lot of education to get there. By the time they get to their final place with a PhD, Master's of Science, they have a language that they use that they cannot necessarily talk to the other departments. So you have miscommunication within a company, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. Within all pharmaceutical companies, you have a hell of a time getting quality to talk to manufacturing, to talk to R&D, to talk to these different groups, because they have a different language that they speak, technical language. The myth of cost and quality, I'll go more into that in a minute. But what you hear is, I sell to Africa, therefore I can't afford to have compliance. That's crazy talk. Lack of technical knowledge on the shop floor. If you want to make a good product, you should make sure the people who make the product know what they're doing. Very simple. What is the missing focus? Come back. What to look for in companies. So, by the way, some of these things have to do with pharmaceutical companies, but a lot of them have to do with any company. So what to look for in companies. Strength of leadership, depth of technical knowledge in executive and middle management, level of interaction of the leadership with the shop floor, and the quality assurance unit, level of knowledge where the process is developed, level of knowledge where the product is made, level of knowledge where the product is tested. When talking about different markets, is the goal to meet the specification for the market requirement or for the company's standard for best product? Does this describe any company in the world? Pharmaceutical or otherwise? If you're going to invest in a car manufacturing company, a chip manufacturing company, all this is the same. What to look for in biopharma companies? Percentage of the headcount of personnel in the QA/QC regulatory affairs unit versus the rest of the operation. Is it a nice balance of about 20 to 25%? How the executive management talks about accountability. How the executive management and head of quality talk about accountability to public safety as both a corporate strategy, because you're trying to sell to that market, and as a tactical evaluation of the product on a daily basis. Depth of understanding of the cost of poor quality and the value of investment in quality. Is quality treated as overhead or as integral to success? So if you're doing due diligence on a company, these are the questions you should ask. Long-term outlook. So I was asked to give some idea what I thought about Indian pharma and where it was going. So that's what this is. So 2 pluses on Indian regulatory landscape with changes to Schedule M. Bless the DCGI, the CDSCO. Thank you for changing the schedule. God bless you. Pending change to make an independent drug agency. There's been a lot of talk about making the Indian FDA separate from the rest of the ministries. Sorry to hear. Foreign direct investment for biopharma and medical devices, the NRIs to return from the US. So there's a lot of money coming in. I've been talking to a lot of companies about investment from NRIs back into India. Current US political environment may accelerate the reverse of the scientific brain drain, because I think a lot of people will come home because they're just unhappy about being in the US. Even I'm here. I can't leave the US, I'm already here. So. Biosimilars are on the rise. Biosimilars have a lot of cost issues because it's a very expensive process, but for sure people are investing. Medical devices are just over the horizon for the regulations. Schedule M is going to be approved at some point here. Taxes, the internal market shift, there are a lot of things that have to change to make India work for medical devices, but once that happens, I think it'll be a massive investment. Vaccine manufacturing, the next generation of vaccines. Because of the human genome, we now know so much more about the human body and how the different things in the body react. A lot of vaccines are coming out of that. I think APIs, once they get the compliance and safety issues resolved, I think that it will continue to boom. Injectables. There are many technical problems with injectables. There are also behavioral problems with injectables. We talked about the video camera that Mylan had that showed that people were behaving improperly on the shop floor. That technical knowledge has to be improved, which our friend is working on for the training side of it. But also there's a lot of data integrity issues. It's a very hard science. Injectables is a hard science. It has to be aseptic processing. There isn't a lot of automation in that process yet. So as that becomes more automated, I think it will get better. And the other thing is that the microbiology units are still all very manual. There's no objective data coming out of it. It's all subjective because they're testing, and so it's all manual. So it's tough to have the objective things you're having in QC for the analytical side in microbiology because it's still very manual. So it's easy to cheat. Then the younger generation of ethical business owners, I'm just astounded by younger men who are in their 30s and 40s who want to get into this business, and they're just so different than my generation. Of course, I'm only 42. Increasing use of automation in the lab and manufacturing. Obviously, as you remove people from the process, things get better. I did this before I met you, I swear. And then increasing presence of international insurance influence. This can't be understated. The Underwriters Laboratories was here and had a conference. I've heard that Factory Mutual is going to be coming here, that the other insurance companies are beginning to recognize, hey, in order for you to be a successful business, you need these insurances. For you to have these insurances, you must be a successful business.
Excuse me, Mr. Green. We were just at speakers at that UL conference 2 weeks ago.
How did that go?
Went great.
Yeah.
We had a lot of good audience participation. We had a lot of good interactive sessions with people. We had a lot of good questions and answers. And we had a pretty large group, about, I'd say, 75, 80 people, approximately.
Great. Yeah, so it's all about money. If you want to have these licenses, you want to have these people involved with you, then you need to meet those requirements. So I have 2 last slides. One's on the cost of quality, and then I'll tell you about another case study. So here's the graduated cost of compliance knowledge. And I threw this together, so don't hold me to any of these numbers, but it's roughly, it will show you a rough approximation. If you do a data integrity only audit, it'll cost you about $10,000 if you do it from India. It'll cost you about $50,000 if you do it from the US. But it has the beautiful thing of telling you whether or not you have data integrity problems. It won't tell you all your problems, but at least it'll tell you whether you have it or not. If you do a data integrity gap assessment, well, that'll cost you more money, of course, because you're going to go deeper and find more stuff. But what it is it's an insurance policy. If you can find those issues before a regulator does, or before you put product in the market that has those problems, you can remediate it and get it out of your culture. A GMP data integrity and compliance audit, certainly more. Doing a full gap assessment is more. But then the last two numbers are the big ones, right? If a company's in severe trouble, but you get ahead of it and you take care of it by pulling people in to do the remediation ahead of the inspection, it's going to cost you money. It'll cost you about $2.5 million to remediate your own problems. But if you don't remediate your own problems, well, 2 to 2.5. If you don't remediate your problems, then you're talking about 20 plus. You don't want me to talk about the last one? I only have one last slide, really, I swear. Okay, one last slide. This last one is my partner in the US, worked for ASI. A guy named Larry Crankin used to be president of ISBE. He worked on the shop floor. At the time, it was 20 years in industry. He was a tablet press operator, worked to a division head at Boehringer Ingelheim, eventually joined ASI. He was extremely famous for speaking the truth, and because he did what all businesses in the world do, he made the best product he could. Only in pharma do we meet a specification. We don't make the best product. So, how successful was he? They built that site because they had a CMO with Pfizer, and Pfizer was costing them too much for that CMO. They built a plant in North Carolina to take that product on. Interim, while they built a plant in China, they would eventually be selling product to the US. Back to the US, they closed that plant. The China plant was abandoned. China could not beat the financial numbers of the North Carolina plant. Think about that. We're sitting in India. That guy's in the US. And China's price point could not beat his. I cannot tell you how important it is to have the best product. That is the number one thing, however you get there. And so when you do your due diligence, find out who's making the best product, because those are the guys you want to invest in. That's it.